On this video, I would like to do a reading of John 18 along with a running commentary, verse by verse, and application. I've been working through John, looking at chapter summaries, and we are now at 18. It looks at the arrest of Christ, followed by his first trial before Annas, and then finally his second Jewish trial before Caiaphas, and then the first Roman trial before Pilate, followed by the second Roman trial before Pilate. So we begin. When Jesus had spoken these words, he went out with his disciples over the brook Kedron, where there was a garden, which he and his disciples entered. And Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, for Jesus often met there with his disciples. Notice he would often go to that place for quietness, a place of peace. And we all need that in our lives, to get away and have a place of quietness. Then Judas, having received a detachment of troops and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, came there with lanterns, torches, and weapons. Notice they're coming against Christ with all of this force. And notice what happens. Jesus, therefore, knowing all things that would come upon him, went forward and said to them, "Whom are you seeking?" They answered him, "Jesus of Nazareth." And he said to them, "I am he." And Judas, who betrayed him, also stood with them. Then when he said to them, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. Notice what happens when they come to Jesus and they're looking for him, and he says, "Ego eimi," I am. And it's interesting, early on in John, he had said, before Abraham was, I am. And now we're seeing the statement again. As they are coming to him, Jesus then replies with those same words as they are coming, I am, ego eimi. I am, the he is added. It's interesting, the reference here shows his divinity. And we go back to the book of Exodus. Who do I tell them has sent me? Moses asked. And the Lord said, tell them, Eyeh Asher Eyeh. I am that which I am in Hebrew. And so Jesus is saying, I am. He's using the same title that Yahweh uses of himself in the book of Exodus. And so John is driving this home. Here in John, the emphasis is on the divinity of Jesus. We are not, like in the other Gospels, looking at the great drops of sweat and great drops of blood that he sweat. No, we're looking more not as his human side, but his divinity throughout the Gospel of John. So we go on, and it says, after they ask him, who, he answered them again, whom do you seek? And they said, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus answered, I have told you that I am. Therefore, if you seek me, let these go away. Notice he gives a threefold witness here of ego eimi, I am. He said it in verse 5, verse 6, and now again. In the Jewish world, three witnesses establish a case, and I think John is seeking to illustrate in this threefold witness that he is the great I am. Then it goes on, and he says, let these go away. And Peter then, Jesus said to Peter, notice what happens. Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant's ear and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus or Malchus. Then Jesus said to Peter, put up the sword into the sheath. Shall I not drink the cup my Father has given me? And in Matthew, put up the sword. All they that take the sword perish with the sword. Notice here, Jesus is responding very differently than Peter in a non-resistant way. And that's what he had taught in the Gospels. He had taught the whole issue of non-resistance. Don't resist the evil one. So he's applying that here in this application as well. So as they come to him, they take him captive, and he has his first trial before Annas. Notice verses 12 then to 23. Then the detachment of troops and the captain and the officers of the Jews arrested Jesus and bound him. And they led him away to Annas first, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was high priest that year. Annas was really sort of the power behind the throne in a sense, as far as the priesthood, the high priesthood was concerned. And Annas, he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas. Caiaphas followed Annas. So we go to Annas first, John is saying. Now it was Caiaphas who gave counsel to the Jews that it was expedient or advantageous that one man should die for the people. This is sort of a prediction coming true, even though Caiaphas is not thinking of it in a salvational sense. We notice then as we go on, and Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. Now that disciple was known to the high priest and went with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest. But Peter stood at the door outside. Then the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, went out and spoke to her who kept the door and brought Peter in. Now we're going to learn of the first denial. Notice, then the servant girl who kept the door said to Peter, you are not also one of this man's disciples, are you? And he said, I am not. Notice the first denial is told here, as the Lord had prophesied. And the servants and officers who had made a fire of coals stood there, for it was cold, and they warmed themselves. And Peter stood with them and warmed himself. In a courtyard like this, they would often have a place where they would burn things, and here they're warming themselves. The high priest then asked Jesus about his disciples and his doctrine. Jesus answered him, I spoke openly to the world. I always taught in synagogues and in the temple, where the Jews always met, and in secret I have said nothing. Why do you ask me? Ask those who have heard me what I said to them. Indeed, they know what I said. And when he had said these things, one of the officers who stood by struck Jesus with the palm of his hand, saying, do you answer the high priest like that? Jesus answered him, if I have spoken evil, bear witness of the evil. But if well, why do you strike me? And so notice, again, Jesus now is going to go from this trial before Annas to Caiaphas, the son-in-law. So we read on. Then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas the high priest. And Simon Peter stood and warmed himself. Therefore they said to him, You are not also one of his disciples, are you? A second time. He denied it and said, I am not. So now we have the second denial. One of the servants of the high priest, a relative of him whose ear Peter cut off, said, Did I not see you in the garden with him? Peter then denied again to fulfill the predictions of our Lord in John 13, and immediately a rooster crowed. So John is recording the threefold denial. Then, at this point, he is brought before Pilate. This is the first Roman trial. Then they led Jesus from Caiaphas to the praetorium, and it was early morning. And they themselves did not go into the praetorium, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover. Pilate then went out to them and said, What accusation do you bring against this man? In other words, they were to separate themselves from everything unclean to eat the Passover. So they were not going to go into this, can I say, Gentile area. But Pilate then went out to them and said, What accusation are you bringing? They answered and said to him, If he were not an evildoer, we would not have delivered him up to you. Then Pilate said to them, You take him and judge him according to your law. Therefore, the Jews said to him, It is not lawful for us to put anyone to death. He's talking here about the religious leaders at this time. The only authority to in a capital case was Rome. That the saying of Jesus might be fulfilled, which he spoke, signifying by what death he would die. And I think the thought here takes us back to John. If I be lifted up, I will draw all men to me. And then also in John 3:14, and as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up. Speaking of crucifixion. And so we're learning here from John that Jesus refers to that, what he had said early on, knowing that he would die on the cross. Then Pilate entered the praetorium again, called Jesus, and said to him, Are you the king of the Jews? Jesus answered him, Are you speaking for yourself on this, or did others tell you this about me? Pilate answered, Am I a Jew? I'm a Roman, is the implication. Your own nation and chief priests have delivered you to me. What have you done? He's asking Jesus. Jesus answered, My kingdom is not of this world. An amazing text here. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight, so that I should not be delivered to the Jews for this judgment. But now my kingdom is not from here. In other words, if my kingdom were of this world, my kingdom would arm itself and protect me from going to crucifixion. But my kingdom is not of this world. It's not here. And that's one of the things that I think is important for Christians to understand, that the kingdom of Christ is otherworldly, not of this world. We often lose sight of that, I think. And it's important to understand his statement here. Pilate therefore said to him, Are you a king? Jesus answered, You say rightly that I am a king. For this cause I was born, and for this cause I have come into the world, that I should bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is in the truth hears my voice. So Jesus is claiming to be a king, but not the kind of a king that they were expecting, or that even the religious leaders of that day were expecting. A king that is going to bring salvation through his death upon the cross. Pilate said to him, when he says, everyone who is of the truth hears my voice. Pilate then said, what is truth? How do we define truth? And when he had said this, he went out again to the Jews, that would be to the religious leaders and all the multitude, and said to them, I find no fault in him at all. I find him innocent. I cannot find anything that would be of a capital offense. And notice then the second trial. Luke has Jesus sent to Herod. But here in John, we move on. But you have a custom that I should release someone to you at the Passover. Do you therefore want me to release to you the King of the Jews? Then they all cried out, saying, not this man, but Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a murderer, or a robber, I should say. Notice the difference here. They are willing to have Barabbas let loose, but Jesus crucified. And so Pilate was saying, well, can I just not release Barabbas? No, Barabbas, or can I not just release Jesus? And Barabbas is the one that the crowd cries out, not this man, but Barabbas. In other words, if you want me to, do you really want me to release to you the King of the Jews? Someone should be released here at Passover time, but they all cried out, no, not this man. Don't release this man, but release Barabbas. And we're told Barabbas was a robber. It's interesting. Barabbas is like all of humanity, guilty. But Jesus, the innocent Lamb of God, dies and pays the penalty for all by his death upon the cross. I love Isaiah 53 in the Hebrew. Kulanu katson ta'inu. Ish ledarko paninu v'Adonai hifgiavo et avon kulanu. All of us, like sheep, go astray, each to his own way, but the Lord caused to land upon him the iniquity of us all. So I'll stop there, and then we'll continue in 19, looking at the final trial, the end of the trial, and the actual crucifixion.